Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Huck. Today we are doing my October book haul. I have 12 books to talk about today. I was not expecting to have enough books to do a book haul in October. I was thinking like, you know, there aren't really books that I need to buy in October. And yet, somehow I have 12 of them. Part of that is because most of these are actually nonfiction books. Last month, I think I mentioned that I have really been in the mood for nonfiction recently, so I've bought quite a few of them, but I do have a couple of fiction books, so we'll get through those ones first. So the first ones are actually ones that I had also mentioned in my last book haul, which are The Harp of Kings and A Song of Flight by Juliet Marillier. These are the first and third books in the Warrior Bards trilogy. So the reason that I got the first and third is because the first book I had already read, but I had a ARC copy and I had forgotten to buy a finished copy when the book came out, so I finally got around to doing that. And then A Song of Flight, the final book, just came out. It's just published. So I pre-ordered this and I got it. I have already read this and it will be in my October wrap-up, which is very exciting. But this is a historical fantasy series from Juliet Marillier, who is one of my favorite authors. It's set in the same world as the Seven Waters and Blackthorn and Grimm trilogies. And in this, we're following three young warriors who in the first book are all training and vying for a place on Swan Island, which is this island where they train elite warriors. And then they get sent on a mission, and each book in the series has its own mission that they are sent on, but then there's kind of an overarching plot across the trilogy that has to do with these mysterious beings called the Crow Folk. So these ones are now on my shelf, which I'm glad to have the full trilogy. Then the most recent release that I have is The Keeper of Night by Kylie Lee Baker. This is I think it's a YA fantasy that is following Ren, who has grown up in London. She is half British Reaper, half Japanese Shinigami, and when she has been living in London, she has always felt kind of out of place among the other Reapers because she is part Shinigami. And so something happens that forces her to flee London and go to Japan and try to find other Shinigami and find her place among them. But I think she finds that that may not be as easy as she thinks, or it may not work out the way she is expecting. But the last sentence says, Ren will learn how far she'll go to claim her place at death's side. That sounds amazing. So I'm very excited about this. Also, it has such a beautiful cover, so I'm very excited about this. And then the last fiction book that I have is a novella, which is A Psalm for the Wild Built by Becky Chambers. This is her most recent release that is the beginning of a series of novellas called, I think, Monk and Robot, because we're following a tea monk and a robot. So the main character in this is a tea monk, which is somebody who travels around and listens to people's problems and gives them tea and comforts them. But then they decide that they need to strike out on their own into the wilderness, and while they're there they encounter a robot, because the robots have been living in the wilderness for the last 200 years or something, ever since they gained consciousness and they made a deal with humanity that humans would leave them alone. But now the robots have sent this one robot to go kind of make a connection with humanity and see what's going on. So we're following these two characters as they end up traveling together, and they're kind of learning about each other and sort of making this first contact in the last 200 years. So I've already read this one as well, and this will also be in my October wrap-up. All right. So then let's get into the nonfiction books. So actually I have one poetry book and then a few nonfiction books. So the poetry book that I have is The House of Belonging by David Whyte. David Whyte is a poet that I have really enjoyed in the past. And so I've been meaning to get more books from him. And I just recently bought a whole bunch of stuff from David Whyte. So I have 3 of his nonfiction books also, because I did not realize, so I've read a couple of his poetry books, but I didn't realize that he also has some nonfiction about like the nature of work and like the corporate world and all of that, which is really interesting, and kind of his philosophy about like working. So I got a couple of books about that also. So this is the poetry book that I got. Then I also got, well actually this one isn't, is this about work? No, this is just about words, but this sounded interesting. I got Consolations, the solace, nourishment, and underlying meaning of everyday words. Just sounded interesting. I just want to read more from David Whyte because I've liked his poetry. Then the ones I got about work from him are The Heart Aroused, Poetry and the Preservation of the Soul in Corporate America. Sounds like an important topic. And then also The Three Marriages, Reimagining Work, Self, and Relationship. So those are all from David Whyte. Then what other nonfiction did I get? Next up, I have The Practice of Groundedness, a transformative path to success that feeds, not crushes, your soul. I feel like you can kind of see a theme in the type of nonfiction that I've been picking up recently. I just think it's very interesting, these ones that sort of are about, I guess, that like the nature of work and finding a balance in your life and your work. Oh, and this is by Brad Stulberg. So I'm also very interested in this one, of course. Then I have another book that is, this one is more like directly for my job, which is The Burnout Epidemic, The Rise of Chronic Stress and How We Can Fix It by Jennifer Moss. So I think it was in my last book haul that I hauled a different book called Burnout, and that one was taking more of a look at how individuals can manage their own stress and avoid burnout. This is looking more at burnout on like a systemic level, specifically like occupational burnout. So the kind of burnout that you experience at work and what organizations can do to prevent burnout and like support their employees. Oh, why is my camera going in and out of focus? Hold on. What is happening? Has it been doing that this whole time? If it has, I am sorry. Anyways, so I got this because I'm still doing some research about burnout. This one is actually much shorter than I was expecting. It's only like 250 pages. So I was expecting it to be quite chunkier, but I feel like a lot of nonfiction books, at least in this kind of genre of nonfiction, tend to be relatively short. So that's good though, because I think I'm going to be just like binge reading this. All right, so those are the ones that I had bought kind of in like a certain, I don't know what that genre of nonfiction is, but I feel like they all kind of go together. Then I have a few books that I got because people that I work with have recommended them to me and they sounded interesting. So one of them is The Coaching Habit, Say Less, Ask More, and Change the Way You Lead Forever by Michael Bungay Stanier. Stanier. We'll go with that. So this one is about coaching, which I think will be really interesting. And I'm very curious to see what it has to say about changing the way that you lead. Not that I'm in a leadership position in my work, but there are elements of leadership in every position that you're in, so it'll be interesting. One that I'm particularly interested in actually is also A More Beautiful Question, The Power of Inquiry to Spark Breakthrough Ideas by Warren Berger. Inquiry is something that I think is really interesting, and I think questions are really interesting, so I'm very excited about this. I also know that this is an author that my mom has been interested in for a long time, so maybe we'll like read this together or, you know, get to talk about it or something. So that'll be interesting. And I'm just very excited to like learn more about questions because I love asking people questions. I think questions are such an interesting thing. So I'm excited about this. And then the last book that I have is How to Measure Anything, Finding the Value of Intangibles in Business by Douglas W. Hubbard. this is one, again, that was recommended to me. This one sounds like it's not, I don't think this is going to be the kind of book that you read cover to cover. It seems more like a reference book. So we'll see. I mean, I'm sure that it'll be very useful. I mean, the person who recommended it to me is like very enthusiastic about this book and tries to get everyone to read it. So I'm sure it has some great stuff in it. So I'm very interested in it in that way, at least. Anyway, so those are all of the books that I have gotten in October. Let me know if you've read any of these. I wonder, have any of you read any of these nonfiction books that I got? Because I feel like I don't know anybody who reads these kind of books. But yeah, also just let me know what books you have gotten recently, if there's anything you're really excited about. Have you been reading any nonfiction lately? And what like genre of nonfiction do you read? I don't know what this genre that I've been picking up is called, but I'm very excited about it. Anyways, thank you all for watching, and until next time, bye!